All right. Hey, welcome to the Backyard Professor Live. We are here on a Sunday evening with nothing better to do than waste your time, and you're wasting mine. Congratulations. We are the time wasters of the world who should unite. No, I don't have any real good juicy gossip about Mormonism. That's why nobody showed up tonight. That makes sense. However, I do have a very interesting topic that I will share with you that I find particularly intriguing. But first, I do have an announcement. I am going on vacation, the first vacation of my life I'm actually officially taking for 2 weeks. And so I am not convinced yet that I am going to take my computer. I'm still mulling it over, but if I don't, you won't see me for the next 2 weeks, which you're not going to miss anything anyway. So you can have a reprieve, but then I expect to see all of you back the third Sunday from today. So we are going down to New Orleans. Yeah, I'm going to do some shorts. And at first I wasn't sure I was going to take my computer, but I think I will because it might be fun to do some recordings down there. And I don't know if I'll have the ability to do live or not. That might be kind of fun and interesting to do. So let's say hi to everybody. Doug Vincent, my man, Tim Rathbone, Steve Acosta. How are we all doing? Good to see all of you. I think you three are the only three here, which is good for all of us. So I just did a documentary. I just finished my second in a series of documentaries on the historical Jesus. I just uploaded it about an hour ago, and I really ran into something that shocked me. I was so stunned. I said, man, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a documentary on that. And oh yeah, thank you, Steve. I will do so. Absolutely. All of the rest of you guys, if you want to throw me some money for my vacation, chuck it now. Yes. Thank you. That's very nice, Steve. I will do that. Some spicy gumbo, huh? Ooh, I might have to get used to some spice, sugar and spice. And the cool thing is, my daughter-in-law tells me that they are having a jazz festival. That'll be fun to catch some of that live, get some genuine New Orleans jazz. I might have them do me a jingle or something so I can do it for my opening on my shows. That would be fun. So, hey, Newton Lemos, good to see you, my man. Robert Knight, good evening. Yeah, I didn't get any chess videos made this weekend either. I'm being very negligent. I've got to do a couple of them real quick before I ditch out for 2 weeks. Everyone's going to think I died. So, hey, Peter Higgs, good day, you cool bloke yourself. Yeah. Hey, he can call us a cool bloke. He's from way down under, so I'm going to return the compliment without question. So here's the crazy thing about the historical Jesus that I want to just share with you. Sincerely. It's a fascinating topic, and it's irrelevant what you believe, what you don't believe. It's irrelevant what you think or what you don't think about it. That doesn't matter without question, even whether he lived or didn't. Doesn't even matter if you're a historicist or a mythicist. It's irrelevant. This is one of the most influential people that maybe never lived, according to the mythicists. And amazingly enough, he is the most divisive of any religious leader that has ever lived. Have you ever thought of that? I've been thinking about that as I've been putting this documentary together. And I think part of what keeps the game going with the historical Jesus, well, criminy as far as that goes with the theological Jesus, the thing that keeps the game going is he doesn't seem to mind at all what anybody thinks. I'm not even convinced he cares whether anybody even knows he exists. Sincerely. Because he sure doesn't do anything about it, right? I mean, all of the Western theology, I'll put it this way, all of the Western Christian theologies say that Jesus, it's very important to Jesus that we live righteously. Criminy, the Mormon Jesus, it's critical that you pronounce his name, especially when you're talking about his church. You've got to say his name. All of this emphasis on the importance of Jesus. Isn't it odd that everybody seems to know what he wants, and yet nobody can come to an agreement about what that is or how to achieve it, as far as that goes, Now, assuming he's real, let's go down the theological path of speculation for just a few minutes. Assuming Jesus actually is alive again, and he really does exist, and maybe every now and then he does peek over at this corner of the universe and sees this speck of dust way the heck over there yonder, and he goes, oh yeah, okay, they're still alive, as if he gives a flying flip. It's been 2,000 years, right, since he was here on this earth. Just about 2,000 years exactly. We're in 2023. And he never came back, nor does it seem to be any kind of an emergency that he shows up among us either. And, you have these religions, these guys who say, well, he came to me and he told me that you and you and you and you need to do this and this and this and this because he told me to tell you. But you notice he never shows up when he could get on national TV. He doesn't start his own YouTube channel and say, hey, yo, people, I'm Jesus. Here's how it goes down. Here's what's going on now. I'm going to have a weekly show, a weekly live show. You can call in and give me super chats. He doesn't do anything to become better known. Oh, sure, he shows up in secret to select special chosen people. And the cynic in me says, so what? That doesn't accomplish anything. It sincerely doesn't. Then when they witness fervently that they really are in touch with him, and this is really what he wants humanity to do, so what? It doesn't accomplish anything. There have been more moral failures. There have been more physical failures in the name of Jesus than all the other deities combined in 2,000 years. Assuming that he really does care and that he's alive is really close to impossible based on the lack of Jesus for 2,000 years. Now, it's real interesting, the cheap pop Mormon psychology that the early Mormons used in regard to Jesus is quite fascinating as well, because their theology said, well, Jesus can't come back unless there is a people prepared for him. You remember when they used to teach stuff like that? I have no idea if they still teach it or not, RFM and Bill Rill and Rebecca Biblioteca and all those people, Mormon News Roundup and Nemo the Mormon and all those guys, they study Mormonism now than any Mormon alive. You might want to ask them. They would be in the know, I have no idea what Jesus wants us to do. Notice the psychology that we have to be the right kind of people before Jesus comes back. Well, there were no right kind of people when he came in the first place. There were no right kind of people when he danced off to America to the Nephites. He ended up destroying 9/10 of them first in all the earthquakes and firestorms. And then those that survived the trauma, he just simply gave the sacrament and said, oh, hey, yo, I'm that Jesus dude you've been prophesying about. I got to go, though. See you later. And he never came back. He doesn't come back on a world scale. Obviously, he doesn't want to be here with us because maybe humanity sucks You know, all you have to do is turn on the flippin' news and see how either stupid, evil, or non-caring 99% of humanity is. Why? Because we're busy trying to stay alive. You know, and has he shown up and helped us make it any easier? No, of course. Well, that would threaten your free agency, brother shirts. You want Jesus to hold your hand and walk you through life? No, I want Jesus to show his sorry absent ass up and run the show, like all the other religions claim he does for that religion. Is that asking too much, you see? I'm kind of on a diatribe. I am doing this completely on the fly. This is nothing like what I planned to talk about tonight. This is just coming out. This is a pure flow of consciousness that's being let out. It's like popping a pimple. Here it comes, and that's tough luck if you don't like it. And if you do like it, I feel your pain. Because Jesus, theologically, is a failure. Now that's pretty shocking. That insults, that cuts to the quick. But where's Zion? What? He's a failure theologically. Where's the peace? Emmanuel, the Prince of Peace. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Where? In his own chosen land of Israel right now. If he gave a flying flip about anybody, wouldn't you think, how about Russia and Ukraine? You know, does he really give a flying flip about anybody? He sure has a weird way of showing, well, I'm going to welcome you into my arms on this side. That's not the theology we're needing or looking for. He promised to come back and bring in the millennium of peace, and it's been 2,000 years. So it's these type of ideas that flow through our heads. And of course, it's flowing through mine because, once again, I'm on this historical Jesus kick, and it's a lulu of a subject. I mean, it's fan-flippin-tastic. Well, thank you, Steve. Why doesn't Jesus trust mankind? He's afraid he'll get double-crossed. Dude, that's worse than any of my dumb dad jokes. Oh, yeah. Wanda Anthony, good to see you. 4 of 6. Don Smith, good to see y'all. Yeah, I did not intend to open this spicy, but it has punch for 2 reasons. And it's a wild 2 reasons. One, there's a lot of evidence that I can use to back up what I just said for the opening 15 minutes. 2, there's a lot of lack of evidence to show that theologically, Jesus has to be the most failed deity in existence. And that's a crazy way to view it. See, in the process of trying to understand this guy, this character, this, dare I say it, creation of man and womankind through these millennia, the theology does not satisfy. The theology does not complete humanity here and now. We feel we're alone and unloved because we are alone and unloved. So sincerely, I get it. I have a lovely Christian friend on the message board I won't say her name. In fact, I have several of them that I can think of off the top of my head, who says that's because Jesus leaves it to us to love one another. Well, that terrifies me half to death because you don't see it on a worldwide scale. And we should. We should hope we would want to, right? You know, that's why one of my goals in life, and it's simple, and I'm doing it in the most cornball fashion I can. I want to make a few people in the world smile who wouldn't smile otherwise. And that's why I've taken to doing short, dumb dad jokes on my YouTube. Now, some of them get tens of thousands of views, which just blows my mind. I mean, my shorts get way more views than my long form. Hardly anybody watches what I have to say when I'm in a serious mood, but they love the cornball stuff on the shorts. Because of the laughter. Oh man, that's so dumb, I have to laugh and I don't want to. I've had people tell me that. And of course, you always get one or two who castigate you and, you know, take you to the woodshed, telling you how really stupid you actually are. And you're not very funny at all. And I'm not laughing. And I'm unsubscribing to your idiocy. You know, you always get those, right? If there's no pleasing everyone, is that a clue as to why Jesus didn't bother coming back? I don't know. I don't think anybody does. So this split, it's almost, well, not almost, it has been a necessity. And underneath all of the fuzzy, warm feelings and love and praise and worship of Jesus that we've all done, underneath all of that, there appears to me in people a substratum of just, Lord, help thou mine unbelief. There is a lack of belief. What credibility is there in a deity who said he would come back and never did? Now I'm making an assumption. Quite frankly, we have no idea, one, if Jesus actually even existed. So all of this may be superfluous. But even if he did exist, we still have no idea what he actually said, right? I got bad news for those of you who are still kind of fundamentalist Christian or Mormon or whatever. Sincerely, and I'm going to get into in-depth on this through my documentaries, we have no eyewitness account of Jesus. None. That's just how it works at this point. And what is so fascinating? Let's assume he's real as a base of operations. All right. So let's say, okay, yeah, but he really does exist. It doesn't appear to me to even matter to him whether he straightens any false doctrine out. He refuses to come back and teach a Sermon on the Mount again, only this time using worldwide television or YouTube or whatever. He really has the opportunity, like nothing ever before, of truly gaining a worldwide audience. May I just say something to Jesus here personally right now on my YouTube? And I'm not trying to be blasphemous, but Lord, you could have hundreds of billions of views on your YouTube videos if you would come back and start doing YouTube videos. I mean, the money you can make. You think your own church in Salt Lake City is rich? Dude, you could smoke them, right? Where is he? He's nowhere. So that's the theological Jesus. And of course, he's made in every church's image who wants to make Jesus believe like they do and think like they do and know how the world works like they do, you know. That's why you have a Mormon Jesus. That's why you have a Baptist Jesus, a Seventh-day Adventist Jesus, a Muslim Jesus, an Australian Jesus, an Eskimo Jesus, a Japanese Jesus. And it's interesting that I just watched a YouTube video by Reza Aslan, the author of this magnificent book, Zealot. Yeah, that guy, he is hilarious. Look him up on YouTube. But he's also seriously informed. And he says, even the various different nationalities, Jesus ends up looking like them. You know, the Oriental Jesus is missing the epicanthic fold in his eye. The African Jesus is black-skinned, etc. That's not a form of blaspheming or putting down Jesus. That is making Jesus after our own image. Otherwise, we can't relate to him. That's why the Americans keep painting him as a white guy, hippie sort of dude with long hair and a beard. But the Mormon Church wackily says the Holy Ghost can't be with you if you're not clean shaven. You can't pass the sacrament if you have a beard or long hair or tattoos or whatever. Well, Jesus wouldn't even be welcome to take his own sacrament in Mormonism based on the artworks of him, right? So, like I say, everything is up in the air with the theological Jesus. Now, here comes a very stunning paradox. We prefer the theological Jesus to the historical one. Every time, hands down. And that probably, until he comes back, if he decides to, that will never change. Not ever, not even once. And the reason why is because the theological Jesus is malleable. He's flexible. It doesn't matter what he looks like. That's irrelevant. Doesn't matter which language he speaks in. That has no relevance either. It doesn't matter which book of scripture he uses. It's irrelevant because he uses it all within whatever culture has whatever book of scripture. The theological Jesus will emphasize that book of scripture in order to help that community feel like they belong to the cosmos. This is the theological Jesus. By far, we are vastly more comfortable with him than any of us can be with the historical Jesus. In fact, we are so uncomfortable with the historical Jesus that there are some in a minority position who advocate he's myth and myth only. He never even existed, right? Because historically, you're stuck in a very specific niche that you can't get out of. Jesus historically was a Jew, an ancient Near Eastern man with brown skin. End of story. Realistically, dark eyes and black hair. He was short. You know, some of these paintings by the Parson brothers out of BYU, Idaho, back when they were working, and they painted Jesus with this magnificent chest and his robe half open, and he's showing off his massive Arnold Schwarzenegger chest and his biceps and huge built shoulders, and he's 6'3", towering over everyone, looking down upon them. I am the Lord your God. That is all very Americanized. That is all very modernized pap and pablum of getting an accurate visual. Jesus would have been much, much smaller, boned, muscled, skin color, eye color, hair color. He realistically would have stank because he didn't get to shower every day. I mean, I hope by now he probably would have gotten water from the camel trough as well with the camels when he was really super duper thirsty, etc. He was a person just like us, but he was a Near Eastern person. And there is a specific cultural way that Jesus could have been being a Jew, right? We're stuck with that. He wasn't a Nordic. No, Jesus and Thor don't go out for morning chocolate milk and donuts together. Thor is a myth. Jesus is a myth. Or, I mean, Jesus knows Thor is a myth, right? Zeus. No, Zeus and Jesus don't arm wrestle, etc. When we look at the historical Jesus, we need to be prepared for serious surprises. Now, of course, and we all have read in the Bible enough to grasp the issue of the implications of the personality, say, of Jesus in the New Testament. Sometimes he's quite a guy. Other times he's a real jerk. A new, and I say new advisedly, I'm going to say new for the general audience. Those of us who were raised on church Jesus, the only Jesus we know is what we were taught in church, okay? And it's irrelevant, Baptist, Lutheran, Mennonite, Jehovah's Witnesses, doesn't matter, Mormon, Catholic, Lutheran, Episcopalian, I can't name them all, but the church Jesus is what we know. So, and this is part of where the distrust of historians came from out of Boyd K. Peckerhead's mouth, Boyd K. Packer. He didn't trust the historians because they want to tell all. Well, we can't trust the prophets because you don't tell enough. And you're supposed to. So you see, that's a two-way street, right? So this is a remarkable situation. The historical Jesus gives us, ironically, as much doubt as the theological one. And that's crazy. You would think, look, pick one or the other, but we want to attempt to increase our faith. You're not going to do so studying the theological Jesus of the Lutherans, are you? If you're not Lutheran, you'll end up arguing theology, which is, for lack of a better description, theology is someone making something up about Jesus that makes that person look intelligent and pawning it off as, well, this is the way Jesus really, this is how Jesus would have thought. Or, okay, he's placed in an ethical dilemma because we know what the Bible says about Jesus. It's obvious how he would react. And then when you read the Bible, he does nothing of the sort like we thought he would have, or worse yet, should have. And so we end up judging the Jewish historical Jesus by our modern American standards. And it's no wonder we're all skeptical of him, because that's the wrong way to look at him. I'm trying to prime you and prep you for what I'm going to show you tonight, because there may be some who really don't like what I'm going to show you evidence-wise on a new interpretation of Jesus of Nazareth. One, he may not be Jesus of Nazareth, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So the theological Jesus, we end up killing each other over because our theology is only we people who get celestialized in the upper kingdoms get to have sex for eternity. All the rest of you are TK smoothies. Well, that is morbidly offensive to 99% of the rest of humanity, and Mormons don't get it. They don't get why. Why are the Jews so upset because we're baptizing them in our temples in the baptisms for the dead, the Holocaust victims and all? Why don't they realize that we're giving them the true priesthood, etc.? I mean, it's religion in that regard is, quite frankly, offensive, and it's deeply divisive. But then Jesus in the New Testament did say, I come to bring a sword, and if you don't hate your father and mother, then you don't get into the kingdom. Now, what Mormon has ever believed that? Well, it's got to be a mistranslation or something, because families are forever. Look, we have it from Jesus himself, the family proclamation, correct? Okay, then. Of course, Jesus is not going to set out family members against each other, killing each other. Well, then you don't believe the New Testament version of Jesus. But that's the basis for all of the rest of the theology of all of the rest of Christianity. You're just twisting and warping it into a Jesus you can be comfortable with. But the Jesus, the Jewish Jesus, the little runt of a fellow who was not Arnold Schwarzenegger in build or money, would disagree and say, if you don't hate your family, you're not worthy to be with me in the kingdom of the Father. How do you adjust that theology to be comfortable with it? Well, you don't, because it's not meant to give you comfort. And that's the difficulty of theological Jesus, but it is also, as it turns out, a very serious difficulty with the historical Jesus also, that people don't like. And so what they do is they say, well, I distrust the secular people, the scholars. You can't trust them to tell you the truth about Jesus, because they always try to cut him down. Now, what do they mean by that? When churches tell their congregations, read only approved church literature and do not listen to what the world is saying about Jesus, especially not on the internet, for crying out loud, because all they're trying to do is cut him down to size so that he's just another regular Joe like us. And he's not. He is the Son of God. He is the Savior. He is the second person in the Holy Trinity. He is the maker of the universe, etc., etc. All of the theological Jesuses start popping up to refute the historical Jesus that nobody's comfortable with either. And yet, when you read that, there he is. That's the anomaly. This is the challenge of studying the historical Jesus, without question. Hey, Cultural Hall, good to see you. Carrie, see my previous comment. Where's your previous comment, Doug? Oh, here we go. Dan McClellan released a video today that absolutely asserts that the book of Revelations was about first century Christians, not 21st century. Again, the discomfort of the theology. Absolutely. I would second Dan McClellan 100%. The book of the apocalypse, Revelation, is not about our day. Put that to rest. And yet you say, well, then you're obviously becoming an apostate. Satan has hold of your heart because you're disagreeing with prophecy. No, I'm disagreeing with the interpretation that attempts to make a first century document talk prophetically about our day when it has nothing to do with that. That is the theological Jesus coming out. Yeah, I'm glad that. Thanks for letting me know, Doug. I'm glad Dan McClellan spoke up like that. Absolutely. I'll say it here too. The other real stunning thing about the historical Jesus is we think there's a good chance that we found him. And he's not who you think he is. He's certainly not who I have been thinking who he is. And I have a lot of books back here that I've been reading through the years on the historical Jesus from some of the top scholars in the world, some of the top theologians in the world, etc. I've got more over here on my shelf. Jesus is probably the most booked person here in my library, maybe other than my science and my chess and my Hebrew and Greek lexicons and my history section and my medieval section, but he's a close 57th of importance. And I'm here to tell you, nobody agrees with Jesus, but when we undo the layers of theology and history in order to make Jesus palatable to us, when we take that off to find the kernel, the core of the Jesus, we also don't like that because he's not who we've been told. And this is difficult to deal with. So who is he? I'm going to do a shortcut here. I'm going to go ahead and give you the answer to tonight. I got this from a wonderful discussion on Myth Vision 4 years ago. Derek Lambert of Myth Vision interviewed a lady named Lena Einhorn. And her analysis of Jesus was so spectacular that I was mesmerized. And I watched her second interview. Then I looked her up on YouTube and I watched at least 8 other various interviews. She's talked with History Valley. She's talked with several Christian groups, Derek Lambert, Neil of Gnostic Informant. She has just been on a lot of shows, and her thesis is quite frankly amazing because this is the icing on the cake for the historicist versus mythicist butting of heads. Those two camps butt heads. Yes, he existed. No, he did not. They butt heads. The historicist versus the mythicist. Lena Einhorn's thesis, and this is what I made my second documentary on. You will want to go see that documentary, I do believe. Sincerely. In fact, no, I'm not going to look it up right now. It's on my YouTube channel. You know where to go, I hope. So, yes, I am going to give you the answer to the test. We do believe that there was a historical Jesus for real. He's just not the New Testament Jesus. There's no other way to put this. So let me show you the conclusions. I was supposed to have this up. Okay, here we go. In fact, I'm going to make it full screen so that you can see it. This is Lena Einhorn's amazing chart. Now, one by one. Oh. Yeah, can you guys see that? It should be showing up, hopefully. Please let me know if you can see that, or do I have to share my screen? I brought it in as a slide. I do believe that it should be showing up. Each one of these items she has color-coded, and the bottom one here, the death of Theudas in yellow. Okay, good. Thank you, Don. This bottom one. And then up on this top line in the New Testament, the bottom half is from Josephus. WJ is War of the Jews, and JA is the Jewish Antiquity. So each one of these items, she's color-coded, a different color code. These are events with people happening that Josephus talks about. The exact same events occur in the New Testament from the Gospels and Paul, except they have all been shifted back 15 to 20 years in time. There's a time gap here. And it is astonishing that not just one or two weird, odd items in the New Testament are listed, not just one or two different odd items that Josephus talks about, but we're talking about the procurators. We're talking about the tax census of Quirinius. We're talking about the Herods. We're talking about the emperors, Thaddeus and Pontius Pilate, and very major, important robbers, Theudas. We're talking about the event of Stephen in the New Testament book of Acts. We're talking about John the Baptist. We're talking about Jesus Christ. But the crazy thing is, Einhorn has shown, and I will read this from Josephus, that Jesus Christ is most definitely, potentially identified as the Egyptian in Josephus. And I've got to read this to you because this is what made me make my documentary. There is a Samaritan Galilean conflict in Josephus. He throws in the historical details that aren't in the New Testament, but that same conflict is in the New Testament as well. All kinds of cultural issues, politics, religion, and peoples are parallel in both texts. It's just that the New Testament is placed 20 years earlier. When you slide the New Testament portion, that top half of this chart, you slide it over 20 years, you have a match of all of the events that Josephus is talking about, and he talks about Jesus, the New Testament Jesus. Let me read it. Here's Jesus. This is in Josephus. This is his description. These works that were done by the robbers filled the city and with all sorts of impiety. And now these impostors and deceivers persuaded the multitude to follow them into the wilderness, and pretended that they would exhibit manifest wonders and signs that should be performed by the providence of God. And many that were prevailed on by them suffered the punishments of their folly, for Felix brought them back and then punished them. The procurator Felix, who is the counterpart of Pontius Pilate in the New Testament. Fascinating. Moreover, there came out of Egypt about this time to Jerusalem one that said he was a prophet, and advised the multitude of the common people to go along with him to the Mount of Olives, as it was called, which lay over against the city, and at the distance of 5 furlongs. He said further that he would show them from hence how at his command the walls of Jerusalem would fall down. And he promised them that he would procure them an entrance into the city through those walls when they were fallen down. Now, when Felix was informed of these things, he ordered his soldiers to take their weapons, and came against them with a great number of horsemen and footmen from Jerusalem, and attacked the Egyptian and the people who were with him. And he also slew 400 of them, and 200 he left alive, but the Egyptian himself escaped out of the fight, but did not appear any more. And again, the robbers stirred up the people to make war with the Romans, and said they ought not to obey them at all. And when any persons would not comply with them, they set fire to their villages and plundered them. Now, in this chart, had the top set of experiences been moved back over to 50 of the Common Era here, with the parallel of the Egyptian and Jesus, there is no doubt everyone would be comparing Jesus and the Egyptian. And here's why. I will read this because I hope I can find it. Also, the fact that Jesus did come back as an adult from Egypt. That's where he spent his childhood, presumably. But he was definitely an adult when he came back. Am I getting ahead of myself? Hold on, let me see this. Okay. So in the 30s, according to Josephus, we have no strong messianic leaders. In the 50s is where all of the messianic pretenders are, according to Josephus. And the singular most important leader, of course, was the Egyptian. Josephus, I just read about it. If this Egyptian, who was one of the major messianic leaders, had been active in the 30s instead of the 50s, historians would unquestionably have compared him to Jesus, and here is why. The Egyptian is defeated on the Mount of Olives where Jesus was arrested. Both had previously lingered in the wilderness. Both speak of tearing down the walls of Jerusalem. Both had lived in Egypt. Both are messianic leaders with a great following. Both are perceived as major threats by the authorities. So aside from chronology, one thing that clearly does distinguish the Egyptian from Jesus are the circumstances of their defeat. The Egyptian is defeated in a battle. So let's look carefully at Jesus's arrest. And this is where knowing Greek truly does help. I promise. I never got this until this last week. And I'm a Bible student. I look up Greek and Hebrew words. I try to study the etymology and the cultural and the linguistic and the political and the religious contexts of stuff between countries and within the countries, etc. And I never have heard this before. So you're about to hear something amazing. You probably have already all heard this. I didn't. Mark 15:7 says Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder during the insurrection. As if we should know which insurrection Mark is talking about, because there's no talk of any insurrection in any of the Gospels, anywhere. The only description we have is when Jesus and his disciples go to the Mount of Olives to await his arrest, right? Okay, so the conflict seems religious, and it is the Jewish council that arrests Jesus here. Now, the Gospel of John is different. Here's how John puts it. John 18:12 says, "Then the band and the captain and officers of the Jews took Jesus and bound him." Now here's Jesus on the mount with a couple of his favorite disciples, right? And he's arrested. The Greek word John uses for band, what was the band and who was this captain? The Greek word is spira. It is a Roman cohort of 1,000 soldiers. Between 600 and 1,000 soldiers is what I found. Lena Einhorn says 1,000. It's a very large part of an entire legion going to arrest 3 or 4 ragtag men on the Mount of Olives. Why in heaven's sake's name is 1,000 soldiers needed? What's more, this captain, the Greek word is chiliarchos, and he is a commander of 1,000. So what the subtext underneath the public facade of the Gospel of John is giving us is there was a battle on the Mount of Olives, and Jesus lost, and he ditched out. Now, Luke says before they went, Luke has Jesus saying, if you don't have swords, sell your cloak, sell your garment, and get one before you come, before you show up. You have to come armed. See, the underlying theme here is a battle, not a Mount of Transfiguration. That's the theological overlay to hide the fact that 1,000 Roman soldiers and several Jewish of the High Council group showed up to fight Jesus. Why? Because he was the Egyptian, the leader of the rebels against Rome. It is the theological pacifist Jesus that the gospel writers give us in order to change the story up to fit their theology of Jesus that they wanted. The Josephus Jesus in the 50s is the rebel leader, the one who wanted to overthrow Rome and become the king of Rome. We've all heard this. Well, the Jews were expecting a military Messiah, and Jesus, being the theological pacifist, loving Son of God, called to love your enemies, do good to them that spitefully use you, turn the other cheek, etc. That is the theology of the gospel writers who took the story as Josephus' official history said, and they theologically changed it up and moved it back 20 years because, and Lena Einhorn speculates, she says, the reason for this incredibly fascinating time gap, and it is real. You can visually see it right here. This is astonishing. The same events in the New Testament on that upper graph are the same events in Josephus, only put earlier 15 to 20 years. You move those over and you can exactly overlay them because they are the same events involving many of the same people. It's just that they're not identified by the name Jesus Christ. He's called an Egyptian because that's where he came from, Egypt. Not as a child, as an adult. And so this is so remarkable because we have a very fascinating confirmation of Jesus, of Theudas, and the Egyptian is mentioned in the New Testament in another stunning revelation that I want to read to you. This bears distinct similarities to those events of the defeat of the Egyptian. The location, Mount of Olives, is the same. Josephus does not mention, however, that the Egyptian was crucified. There's one of the differences. This seems to distinguish the Egyptian from Jesus. See, again, the historical Jesus makes us uncomfortable. Oh, well, if the Egyptian wasn't crucified, then he wasn't the real Jesus. See, you're muddying up the theology Jesus with the historical Jesus. The historical Jesus was not crucified, but he was defeated as a rebel against Rome. A man whom, with his band of 12 disciples, were killing people, murdering people. He had some of the Sicarii as some of the 12 apostles, bearing witness to him, to the people about him, that he was the one who was going to overthrow Rome, and we're going to do it through the shedding of blood. That's not a comfortable historical Jesus, but there he is. So the Egyptian does appear again, not in Josephus, but in the New Testament, Acts 21:38. Look this up when you get a chance. Paul visited the Jerusalem temple, and people recognized him, and they were very angry with him. They grabbed him. They mobbified him. They were going to kill him. They were dragging him out of the temple. It was such a ruckus that the police were called in, the Romans, and they kind of broke up the ruckus. And Paul told the one Roman legion guard, he goes, "Hey, may I have a word with you?" And it shocked the Roman guard. He said, "What? You speak Greek? Wow. So you're not the Egyptian who recently stirred up a revolt and led the 4,000 Sicarii out into the wilderness?" Jesus fed the 4,000 in one of the gospel accounts on the hillside. He's feeding his army. Now, of course, they've overlain that, I get it, with spiritual teaching. Blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are the poor, blessed are you for loving God, etc. I get all that. But that's the theological Jesus of the gospel authors. The historical Jesus of Josephus, who has been removed and put into an earlier time in the gospel setting, is the man feeding his army to give them the strength to overthrow Rome. There's your Jesus. And he's not comfortable. I get it. It's not comfortable to recognize that's Jesus. I'm with you. But that's Jesus. The probability is high. I'm being pretty definitive and definite. I'm probably overstating this, but this is by far the closest outside the Bible Jesus we have. And the amazing parallels are utterly staggering. This is not coincidence. This is a deliberate attempt to move the stories 20 years earlier, turn him into a pacifist. The defect of doing that is it obscures the historical Jesus from world history. That's the downside of it, right? There are numerous events that if we shifted from the 30s to the 50s, fit like a glove on a hand. And this answers the paradoxical fact that a person, Jesus, in the New Testament, arouses such attention in his time and is seen as such a threat by the authorities. Okay, there's the surface. Underneath, the Sicarii were walking into the crowds during the festivals and murdering people with their little daggers. They had those daggers, that's where they got their name, the Sicarii. They were hitmen. They were assassins. These are some of Jesus's 12 apostles, whom Jesus said, "Come armed. Sell your clothes to get a sword. Better to come naked on the hill with us with a sword than clothed unarmed." And even the other subtext, they've lightened the mood when Peter smites off the ear of the guy. And Jesus says, "Oh, no, put your sword away." And he grabs his ear and heals him. An act of mercy, tender healing of your enemy's ear that just got smitten off. That's the surface meaning. The subtext is saying there was some slashing, gashing, and bleeding and dying going on that Mount of Olives that night. That's the text of Josephus, right? So Jesus was known, and yet he's invisible in other contemporary sources because of this shift. To me, personally, this amazing connection with Jesus and the Egyptian, it also traveled through history. And this is the other thing that Lena Einhorn, bless her heart, she gets full kudos for. This is huge. This is amazing. Amulo, the Bishop of Lyons, circa 847, says the following about the name which the Jews gave to Jesus in his day, 800 years later. In their own language, they call him Usum Hamizri, which to say in the Latin reads Dissipator Aegyptius, the Egyptian destroyer. That's what the Jews were calling Jesus. And then the Sefer Toldot Yeshu, which I do have a copy of. It's around here somewhere. Anyway, the Sefer Toldot Yeshu, this is the Huldrych version, the 1705. Jesus's biological father is called Panthera, and I'm going to do a documentary on Panthera. There has been genuine, legitimate now, I'm not even bluffing, James Tabor, whom I have had on my show, and I will have on my show again. It's a little bit embarrassing that no one shows up to listen to a world-class Bible and Dead Sea Scrolls scholar, but that's what happens. So James Tabor has found some actual archaeological evidence for Jesus's biological dad being named Panthera. And it is so I'm just chomping at the bit to do that documentary as well. Then another earlier source, and this is from the Arnobius of Sycha. This is one of the early church fathers, Arnobius, about 300. And here's what Arnobius said. He's arguing against the heathens, right? So he's got this opponent guy, and he says, yeah, my opponent will perhaps meet me with many other slanderous and childish charges, which are commonly urged. Jesus was a magician. You notice that's the argument about Jesus. Morton Smith was right. It's just so offensive to the theological Jesus to call Jesus a magician that they lambasted Morton Smith. But that's what he was known as, right? Jesus was a magician. He effected all these things by secret arts. From the shrines of the Egyptians, he stole the names of angels of might and the religious system of a remote country. Fascinating. There's your Jesus. There's your historical Jesus, who is not uncomfortable any less than the theological Jesus has become. That's fascinating. What's amazing is Jesus' connection to Egypt was disseminated both by his enemies and his followers through centuries of Christianity. That's the kind of impression Jesus made. That's amazing. And he was elaborated upon in Josephus, and he was pulled back 15 to 20 years and then softened by the gospel writers, essentially hiding who he really was, because it was too unpalatable that he was a murderer, a robber, a thief, a bandit who was going to destroy Rome. That's uncomfortable. But that's Jesus, the historical Jesus. This is why so many people say, leave it alone. I don't want to know the historical Jesus. I'm happy. I'm fine. I get a burning in my bosom. I have a testimony of the theological Jesus who is going to save me from my sins through his sacrifice and atonement, and I will get to heaven. That's the Jesus I want. And so they prefer the theological to the historical, right? That's the issue of our day when it comes to Jesus. So this is absolutely amazing. So anyway, yeah, there are at least 8 other parallels that I have shared in my just fresh made 2-day documentary. I worked on it all week. So I'll encourage you to go to my YouTube website and look up that documentary. It's only 50 minutes long. I've tried to make it very easy to understand. I put texts up for you and I read the texts out loud. I share some wonderful art with you. I go through the historical give and take an analysis of why we think this as opposed to that, etc. And I share absolutely every significance with all of these parallels because I am following Lena Einhorn's lead on this. But that's the bottom line. Jesus was actually historical. It's just not a very comfortable Jesus. So should we have found him? I know there's going to be people that are angry at this, right? The theologians, they are going to hate this. They are going to damn and spit upon and shit on everything about this historical Jesus because it does not fit their paradigm of a fully loving God. Mormon leader Russell M. Nelson. Jeffrey R. Holland, one of the 12 apostles. I wonder secretly, he's one of the Sicarii, right? Because if it's going to be a restored Christianity, then some of these guys in the Quorum of the 12 need to be murderers. And President Nelson, the head honcho, he also needs to be that. They're so unaware of this, they have no idea how bad it is to restore Jesus and the 12 apostles. Isn't that a shock? You study the history. Boyd K. Packer didn't want it. He said, nope, not doing it. On the other hand, ignoring it doesn't make it any less real. You know, do you want the truth or not? Right? So this is an amazing situation that we find ourselves in. So Debbie Donovan, hello, you wonderful woman. Steve McGill, good to see you. Yeah, walk like an Egyptian, right? I'm glad y'all made it. Newton Lemos. Eugene. Cultural Hall. Yeah, see, Eugene disagrees with me. And this is good. It's good to have disagreements in discussion because theology can't mix with history and history can't mix with theology. It's almost as if we're being forced to take a stance on which one is more important to us, right? It's very interesting. And by the way, I don't disagree with that. Jesus is king. Ralph Ellis has a YouTube video. I know he's controversial. I get that. But he has a YouTube video showing how Jesus was actually the king of Edessa over there in the east. And he brought his army to defeat Rome as the king of Edessa. So the argument is not what is Jesus and what is he not. He was a king. Truly. Yes. When they put that placard up on the cross, that wasn't just a smart aleck comment or an insult. They were identifying who they were killing because why? The Romans only crucified people for sedition and insurrection. They didn't give a flying flip about what religious claims you were making. They didn't care. But if you're going to threaten them politically and militarily, your goose is cooked. They killed Jesus as an insurrectionist. That's why he died from the Roman point of view. See, this is the historical Jesus. And I'm actually getting a little itchy about talking about it so bluntly, but, you know, sometimes you have to let it out and let the chips fall where they may. So this is all so fascinating, at least to me. No, we don't know how the Egyptian Jesus died. He disappeared out of the historical record. But here's a very interesting clue, and I'm looking into this. There was a Jesus who escaped crucifixion from Pontius Pilate. Matthew called him Jesus Barabbas, and the crowd called for him to be released. That could be the Egyptian. The guy they crucified wasn't the insurrectionist. He was the theological Jesus of the New Testament. But there were a lot of crucifixions back then in Rome. And I put that in my documentary also. You'll want to watch that. So, yeah, it's very interesting. Very well could be, Debbie Donovan. It's a script. Well, I mean, that's part of repeating history, is plugging in a savior or a hero figure. We do that nowadays with comic books. The Hulk, Thor, the Flash, one of my favorites, Aquaman, etc. Right? It's the hero story. It's the hero with 1,000 faces, the Buddha, etc. It's just so, and this brings us back to the point to, well, do we call this history? Is it history? Is it mythology? Is it folklore? Is it a whole conglomeration and mix of it all? Is it theology? Yes, it's theology. Is it history? Yes, it's history, but it has a different bend than the records. We have too little to make any die-hard conclusions unless you take the theological point. Then you can get rock hard with good priesthood authority and say, you believe this way or we'll excommunicate you. You can get pretty hard line that way. But theology is just a man's interpretation, almost of a wish fulfillment of what they hope deity would be like that we can accept and worship. Theology isn't an objective science of how the universe is any more than physics is. Physics is just based on an interpretation of the physical, whatever that might mean, based on our size as humans. And I'm going to do a documentary on that also. Quantum physics is also another very, very fun subject for me personally. Starla Hansen, good to see you. They might not. I don't know. Yeah, I do know that Reza Aslan, in his book Zealot, he took a lot of heat for trying to tell the historic truth, and the theologians who backslapped him and stabbed him in the back and said he was a real schmuck and an apostate and the devil got his soul, etc. They'll throw all this theological intimidating silliness at you to make you quit telling the naked historical truth about Jesus. Right? So they lambasted him, and he came back and said, I'm simply approaching this as a historian, not a theologian. I'm not here, and me, backyard professor, I'm not here, I don't care to take away your faith in Jesus. If that's what you want, have it. Go with it. That's not my point. My point is to show you there is a difference of a theological Jesus, what they call a theological Christ, and a historical Jesus. And pretty much every Western religion recognizes that. But what's fascinating is the exact same principle is at play when you look at the Buddha. There is a historical Buddha, and there is a theological Buddha. And they're not the same. So this is fascinating. It's just a very interesting situation. So, any other ideas that you guys, The Power of Belief, greatest book ever read in my 2 semesters of college. Yes, and there's nothing wrong with belief, Debbie, and this is just me, it's just my speculation, but there really is nothing wrong with belief if you can couple it with evidence. Believe just for the sake of believing in belief, that is a crime against your brain. I mean, if there is a God and he did create us and he gave us the best part of us, our brain, then damn you for ignoring it and just believing in belief. If that's what you're doing, you're absolutely sinning. If God gave you that great gift, not to use it, even to be critical of God himself, because he's the one that wired us into trying to assess the validity of evidence against non-evidence, etc. And if we are wrong, then for the love of all that is holy, get off your throne and come and tell us if it's that big of a deal to the deity. I'm not convinced it is, because 100% of all humans, from one particular human viewpoint or another, 100% of us are wrong in our beliefs. Isn't that fascinating? We're never going to get to where all of us believe the same thing in the same way. That's absolutely impossible, as far as I can tell. We've been at it now for several 100,000 years, and we haven't come anywhere close to all agreeing on what to believe. Even with evidence, people believe different things. Take, for instance, the 4 Gospels in the New Testament. Has that unified the world about what kind of documents they are, about what they really mean, etc.? You should live so long. If you really think it has, you're not reading and studying much, because there's never been more division than right here, right now, on just 4 small books in just one holy book. I'm not mentioning any of the other books. I mean, look at the Book of Mormon. You have the Heartlanders versus the Mesoamerican people. You know, you have the Trinitarians versus whatever other deity prescription that you can have on the deity in the Book of Mormon. So it's fascinating. That's a good way to put it, Steve. Steve McGill asks, doesn't belief have to have a reality factor? But then you have to define reality. And that goes down many, many interesting deep rabbit holes. It really does. The cool thing that the new atheism did, the really nice service they did for us, is that they have virtually forced us to confront our assumptions and reassess the basis of why we assume and believe what we do. And that's invaluable. In that sense, I would propose the heretical idea that God is guiding the atheists to get the religious people off their dead lazy asses and start using their brains. Quit just saying, "Oh, I believe," and start doing some thinking and reading in books that do not agree with your own theology, and find out why someone interprets the scripture differently than you, not on the basis of condemning them to hell for being a heretic like the idiot early Christians and early Mormons did, but as a basis of understanding, oh, their mind works a little differently. And quite frankly, I haven't looked at that piece of evidence there, and that actually does change some things. That's called using your brains. The best thing God gave us, and we're terrified to do so. It's such a fascinating conundrum, right? Oh, Steve, thank you, my friend. I can try absinthe when you go to Bourbon Street. It will knock your socks off. All right, good. I'll do it. Hopefully it's not more expensive than that. Oh, hi, Donald Allen. Thank you. Yes, it is. It is fascinating. And I don't approach this with the idea of condemning deity or humanity. I don't approach this with the idea of mocking either humanity or deity. I have no interest in doing any of that. I just want to figure it all out, right? Well, based on what we've been taught by other humans about what deity really wants for us, wants for the world and all, it's very difficult to see much evidence along those lines. So those appear to be assumptions. This is what the atheism has done that is so invaluable to us. If we will take that gift and understand it as a gift, not a curse. And that's tricky to do. I'll be the first to throw my card out there and say, yeah, it's somewhat hard. I'll be honest with you, now that I'm 8-9 years down the road from reading everything I could get on my hands on atheism, when I reread them now, I don't get the same out of them that I used to. It's interesting. So I am changing too. And if you're not changing, if you're not adding to your knowledge and your understanding, if you're not letting go of some of your false beliefs, and goodness knows you better realize you do have false beliefs. Everybody does. If you're not readjusting that and letting go, then you may as well be dead, right? If you're not growing, you're shrinking. Don't do that to yourself. That would be my advice. I got to get a drink. Oh, my. All right. So, and I, who thought Professor believed, I am in shock. Well, it depends on what you say I believe, because there's lots of stuff I do believe, and there's lots of stuff I used to believe that I don't, and there's probably stuff that I don't even know about that I don't believe, and there's stuff that I don't know about that if I find out about, I might believe. It's all just a matter of I believe in using my God-given brain to develop a better appreciation of a wider, broader context. Isn't that the essence of living? Yeah. Just throwing it out there. So thank you. Yeah, very good comment. Yeah. Very good. Okay, you guys. Well, that pretty much thank you so much for all your generosity and being here and participating with me in the chat and listening to my strange obfuscation of a theological Jesus versus a historical Jesus. It is a most remarkable subject, I promise. It's only going to get better. I am going to do this series of documentaries. Don't forget to look on my YouTube to see the second one just posted today. Go and enjoy that. And I will be doing a lot more as time permits, but I am going on vacation and I will be gone for 2 weeks. So next Sunday and the Sunday after that, unless I decide to take my computer with me, and if I have a way to tap into some kind of an electronic situation where I can do a live in New Orleans, if I take my computer, I might do that. That could be kind of fun. So I just don't know if I want to bother with all the fuss and all of the chords and all that. But on the other hand, I really do like doing these lives and I love making my videos. So I just might do that. So you might be getting lives from New Orleans. Woohoo! Who knows? So, oh, thank you, Peter. Yeah, it's been fun. You too, Cultural Hall. Appreciate seeing you. Yes, I will, Doug. Good deal. Donald Allen. Okay, good. Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. I hope you do. Leave a comment. Please don't forget the like. That helps my algorithm, and I need all the help I can get. So please hit a like. Okay, you guys, Jesus saved us from our sins. Chess is a vibe. Right on, brother. There is the theological Jesus in pure power right there. I love it. Okay, you guys, I will catch up to you just as soon as I can. I love you all, but I got to go. I am out of here. Have a good time.